Okay. I have to do this before I do this.
You're going to call it to order first.
I'll do this here?
Call it to order first.
Good evening, council, members of the town and planning department. See, we have quorum at council. Call this meeting of, let me see what it is, Special Committee of the Whole Public Meeting under the Planning Act in session. Motion put forward by Councillor Kaur, seconded by Councillor Wink.
Oh, there's no second required.
Oh, so it was just a, oh, I see, I'm sorry. Motion put forward by Councillor Stewart. Adoption of agenda. That the agenda for the March 9th, 2020 public meeting under the Planning Act, special meeting of Committee of the Whole be adopted as circulated. Any questions or comments regarding the agenda? Not seeing any. I'll call the vote. All those in favor? All those opposed? Thank you.
Thank you. We have pecuniary interest.
Oh. And at this time, I ask if there is any member of council that has a pecuniary interest after looking at the agenda. Not seeing any. Ask the clerk to please note. And now, a zoning bylaw amendment to permit the use of the property for duplex dwelling. Planning Act requires under Section 34 that council must hold at least one public meeting for the purpose of informing the public in respect of a proposed zoning bylaw amendment. This public meeting has been called to satisfy this requirement. Notice of this meeting was provided by prepaid first-class mail to all persons who are listed as owners in the last revised assessment roll within 120 meters of the subject property on February 14th, 2020. The notice provided information on the property and the proposed zoning bylaw amendment. In addition to providing information, we will also receive any comments which any member of the public may wish to offer. There is an attendance list on the table, which we would ask all present to print their name and complete mailing address if they wish to be notified of the decision by council. If a person or public body would otherwise have an ability to appeal the decision of the town of Pelham to the local planning appeal tribunal, but the person or public body does not make oral submissions at a public meeting or make written submissions to the town of Pelham before the bylaw is passed, the person, public body is not entitled to appeal the decision. In closing, we stress that at this point, no decision has been made on the proposed zoning bylaw amendment, and therefore any comments received will be taken into account by council in their consideration. Thank you. And now we ask for signing. And now we would ask a presentation from the planning department, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of council, and members of the public. The meeting tonight is regarding an application for zoning bylaw amendment for 1084 Quaker Road. And that property is located on the south side of Quaker Road, west of Kevin Drive. The requested zoning change would add a duplex dwelling as a permitted use on the property. The existing property contains a single detached dwelling and a detached garage. No changes are proposed to the location or size of any of the structures on the property at the present time, and nor are any changes proposed to the parking area. The land use planning framework for the property includes being within a designated settlement area in the provincial policy statement. Settlement areas are intended to be the focus of growth and new development and include a mix of uses and housing types that efficiently use land and infrastructure. The property is also within the delineated built-up area in the growth plan for the Greater Golden Horseshoe, and half of all new residential development is intended to happen within this area. The region's official plan designates the property as being within the urban built-up area, and that permits a range of residential, commercial, and industrial uses. as well as institutional uses, and it supports all different types of housing. The town's official plan designates the property as being within the urban living area and built boundary. This permits all different types of residential uses as well as institutional and neighborhood commercial uses. And the current zoning on the property is R1-26. That allows a single detached dwelling with a minimum rear yard of 61 meters. All of the properties in this area of Quaker Road have that same zoning. And no change is proposed to that rear yard setback as a result of this application. That will carry forward. The current R1 zone permits a single detached dwelling as well as accessory structures and home occupations. And the site-specific zone that's being requested would simply add a duplex dwelling as a permitted use, in addition to those uses that are already allowed in the R1 zone. A number of comments have been received from agencies and members of the public at this time. Enbridge Gas has advised they have no objections. Niagara Peninsula Energy has advised that it's outside of their service area. Canada Post has offered no comments or conditions, and the building division has advised that a building permit will be required for the basement dwelling unit, that proper drawings will have to be prepared in accordance with the Ontario Building Code. And from Normand Mailhut, sorry if I butchered that, he's opposed to the application. He's concerned about neighborhood property values, parking, traffic, garbage. He wants only single detached dwellings in the existing neighborhood. And after this presentation was prepared, there were some additional comments that were received from James Shannon and Nigel and Pamela Shelton. James Shannon is opposed to the application. He believes the street is single-family residences and has been since its inception. Nigel and Pamela Shelton are concerned about negative impacts to property values and the change to the dynamic of the neighborhood. They feel that their single-family neighborhood is at risk. And in conclusion, no decisions or recommendations are being offered tonight on this application. Once all of the comments have been received from the public, from agencies, from council, a recommendation report will be prepared by staff and come back to council at a later date. If anyone wishes to receive notices that hasn't already provided written comments, please make sure that you've signed the sign-in sheet and we can keep you up to date on this application. And following tonight, questions and comments can be directed to me through this contact information, and planning staff are available tonight for questions.
Okay, thank you. So you have a motion put forward by Councillor Wink. Information report, application of zoning bylaw 1084, Quaker Road, 2020-00035 planning. The committee received report number 2020-35 for information as it pertains to 1084 Quaker Road, file number AM-01-20, and recommend to council that council direct planning staff to prepare the recommendation report on this application for consideration. Any questions on this report? Okay, Bob? No. Okay, not seeing any. Do we vote?
You can call the vote.
Okay, so not seeing any, I'll call the vote. All those in favor of this report. I just want to read this one more time.
It's just receiving it for information. It's an information report with no recommendation.
Okay. That committee received report number 2020-35 for information as it pertains to 1084 Quaker Road, and that council direct planning staff to prepare the recommendation report on this application for consideration. Okay. All those in favor? All those opposed? Okay. Now, I lost that sheet. Thank you. So now at this time, we have the presentation by the applicant, please, if there is one. Okay, thank you. Oh, and please, for the council and for the record, identify yourself, please.
Oh, I'm Della Lenny. I'm an occupational
Thank you, Shannon.
Mayor, Council, I'm glad you're listening to us tonight, because I also want to say something here, that maybe a number of these people that are opposing don't realize the whole reason for this, what's going forward. This all came to be when we asked the town for an accessibility permit. Okay? You turned us down for the accessibility permit because we had a basement apartment. You asked us to rezone. First it was for a triplex. Now it's back down to a duplex. We want an accessibility permit. This is very difficult. My husband needs it. The insurance had put forward a plan that was enormous, to the tune of $500,000. And it was all turned down, and that all went away. We lost that. Eventually, Rick will be in a wheelchair. It's given. He's walking to some degree, but only because of his perseverance. Whether or not we have this building rezoning, I don't really care anymore. I'm tired of it. I want accessibility. That's what we need. We want to stay in our house. We lived there for 32 years. I think it's acceptable. And I don't even know these people that are opposing us. I don't know. They don't probably even know us. They have no idea. And we're not, there's 4 people in our house. We live on an acre. I've said all this before. We have so much property. You want densification, and I'm trying to give it to you, and you don't want it. You don't want to give it. I feel like I'm being bullied on one side and bullied on another, because no one wants to meet us in the middle. I guess that's all I have to say. But I want everybody to know that's opposing. It is for accessibility. That's what we really need. I don't know where you live, but I'm sure I've never had a problem with you. I don't have any pride, and I hope they realize too, our neighbors next door is a triplex. So it's not like our street doesn't have it. It was grandfathered in 30-some years ago. So I don't know what the problem is. I don't know. I give up knowing. It's we came for one thing, and we got all this thrown at us. And yes, I think Barb told us if it never come forward with that accessibility plan, and nobody been the wiser. So what am I supposed to do now? You tell me.
Oh, well, you're following the correct steps, Ms. Delaney. This is the proper process, and the wheels are in motion, and we'll see where it goes. These are steps that had to be taken.
It seems like it's such a long process. I mean, our insurance money went by the wayside. And so whatever we do, it's up to us. So take it or leave it. That's all I have to say.
Okay. So.
Residents of Pelham out of their home.
Well, wait a minute. We really shouldn't be debating here. So first of all, is there any questions that anyone on council? This is not the.
Please ask.
Yeah.
Somebody needs.
So the
to
clerk
ask.
has said the questions are for clarification, but it's not for debate at this point. So if there's anything in Mrs. Delaney's presentation that you need clarification on, that's what this is for. Councillor.
Yeah, to the director, what property are we talking about a triplex?
We live at 1084 Quaker Road, Fonthill. We back up against Black Park. We have a 1 acre piece of property. We've been there for, as I said, 32 years.
Mr. Mayor, through you, the property beside this property at 1086 is a triplex.
Okay, thank you.
Councilor Trophy.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. The question here and what the applicant is looking for is an accessibility permit. Is an accessibility permit not not permitted to get if it's not a duplex? What's the complexity of receiving the accessibility permit?
Mr. Mayor, through you, they need to renovate their home, which requires a building permit. The renovations are to make the home accessible. And in order to get a building permit, it needs to comply with the zoning. And currently, the zoning is only for a single detached dwelling. So that is why they need the zoning bylaw amendment to recognize two dwelling units.
So through you, Mr. Mayor. So if the zoning is not allowed, an accessibility permit will still be achievable, correct?
Mr. Mayor, through you, it's not an accessibility permit. It is a building permit that they need to make their home accessible. So they're going to be doing changes to the home that require a building permit. And the Ontario Building Code Act requires that prior to issuing a building permit, it needs to comply with the zoning. So if the zoning is not approved, the chief building official would not be able to issue a building permit to make the renovations to the home.
And may I add that accessibility is a human right? It is a human right.
I understand that. I'm just seeing how you can get the permit. So if it was back to a single dwelling home, would a building permit be available?
Mr. Mayor, through you, no, it will not, because there are two dwellings in that property currently, and we can't issue a permit where there isn't conformity with the zoning.
So, through you, Mr. Mayor, just for clarification, so that second unit, correct me if I'm wrong, it's a basement unit. How is that, if that basement unit were converted to be back to the single-family dwelling, could we issue a building permit? So, eliminate the basement apartment.
Mr. Mayor, through you, my understanding is that it's not something that the applicants feel that they can do. They do want to maintain the second dwelling unit.
I will give it up if I can get accessibility. It's not something I want to do because I don't like the idea of evicting people, and especially when you have no affordable housing in town. This makes me very angry, at the least, because you're not helping anybody. You're not helping us, you're not helping anybody else that needs it in town. And this is something that should have been put on your books a long time ago, as far as your bylaws. And it's not been addressed.
Thank you. And I may have missed this in your presentation because I was talking to the clerk, but if I have a question to the planning director. So this application with the duplex, there is no outside building that has to take place. The structure stays, there's no additions onto this building. The structure stays exactly as it is. Basically what we're doing is putting the right by zoning on this piece of property.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, through you, there will be no building addition, no expansion to the dwelling or the accessory building to permit this. The basement apartment exists in the lower level of the house, and so the zoning bylaw amendment will recognize that condition of the existing second dwelling.
Okay, thank you for that. Thank you for the
I
clarification.
might add, that part of our house has been there for 20 years. It's not a new build. It's been there.
Great, thank you. Do I see any other questions to the applicant? If I'd not seen any, I appreciate the presentation. Have a motion put forward by Councillor Wink that committee receive the applicant's presentation for information. Any other questions, debate? Not seen any, I call the question. All those in favor? All those opposed? Motion carries. Now, at this time, we will ask for the public input. If there's any member here from the public who would like to make a presentation, please come to the microphone, identify yourself, and you're more than welcome to address council. Once.
Is this a time for asking any questions, or is that?
Madam Clerk.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, members of the public are invited to the podium to ask any questions. The planning staff is available to answer any questions. The applicants are here to answer any questions. The only thing that can't occur is council debating at this point because there's no recommendation report before them.
Okay. Do I understand that
Maybe just go to the mic, please. Thank you. And please identify yourself.
Yeah, Nigel Shelton. Do I understand right now that the issue is that there's an apartment but that hasn't been recognized up until now, and in order to bring things up to standard, you now have to recognize it and call it a duplex? Is that, have I got that right?
Mr. Mayor, through you, yes, that's correct. The apartment, when it was constructed or installed, there weren't permits issued for it at the time, and so it's not there legally.
So in order to make the accessibility issues that these people would like to make, it has to be a duplex to allow that that change to the building. Is that correct?
Mr. Mayor, through you, yes, the zoning needs to be changed to permit a second dwelling unit known as a duplex.
And I'm sure it's a long explanation, but to Mike's questions earlier, is there any particular reason why it needs to be a duplex in order to make this accessibility change? Like without going into too many of the details, is this like a new staircase or an elevator or something else in the building that has to go happen?
Not yet.
No, but is that the proposed?
Well, it's
Excuse me, members of the public and the applicants are reminded to address their comments and questions through the mayor. Thank you.
To the mayor. So, well, I'd just like to understand the level of the change. And
Mr. Mayor, through you, yes, the applicants would like to make some renovations to their home. They would like to put in a lift so that they could be accessible from the main floor to the second floor and the lower unit. Their bedrooms are all on the second floor. And then there's other issues that they want to do in terms of widening hallways for accessibility purposes, widening doorways. All of that is structural work which requires a building permit. And that's the conundrum that we're in.
And sort of one last question, perhaps, is once this building, supposing in order to allow this accessibility issue, which still escapes me why it has to be a duplex, but anyway, once it becomes a duplex, can it be sold as two individual units at some point in the future?
No.
Mr. Mayor, through you, no, there's no ability to divide the property line. It's a second dwelling unit in a house. So whether you call it a duplex or a second apartment, but it's always going to be under one ownership.
Okay, I don't think I have any other questions. Thank you.
other members of the public? Please come forward, identify yourself.
My name is Richard Lenny. I'm son of the applicant. I just want to give a little bit of clarification about that basement unit. What originally happened when my grandmother, she moved down because of health reasons and they moved into the house. They added a granny suite, which was attached to the building, and the lower unit was also attached to the basement through a common entrance. That part was never used as an apartment until such time as I went through a separation and I moved back home. At that time, I moved down into the basement area and we closed off the entrance to the basement just for privacy measures. And I was there for 2-3 years prior to moving out. So it wasn't being done in bad faith or anything like that. Like, it was just, that happened, and once I moved out, there was an opportunity to bring in a student that was going to the college nearby, and it was used as a dwelling for them. So I just wanted to clarify, like I said, it wasn't under bad faith. We weren't trying to go around building permits or anything. It was just to give myself privacy originally when I moved back home, and then things moved on from there. Thank you.
Yes, to the director. Is there a way of grandfathering it, so as long as they own the property, as soon as they sell it, it goes back to a single dwelling property?
Mr. Mayor, through you, there's no mechanism to do that through zoning. Zoning does not allow us to do what's referred to as people zoning. The Planning Act does not allow for that.
Mr. Trophy.
Yeah, just to sum it up then, this is to the Director of Planning. So they can obtain a building permit by changing the zoning, allowing it as a duplex, or by converting it back to a single dwelling unit, correct?
Mr. Mayor, through you, yes, one of those two things need to happen in order to get a building permit.
Thank you.
Yeah, any other council questions? Councillor Stewart.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, it was previously mentioned that. Oh, sorry. It was previously mentioned that there were actually 3 units. There was the granny flat, the basement unit, and the main house. So the granny flat is no longer in operation?
Mr. Mayor, through you, what we understand is that the granny flat is integrated in the house that does have an interconnecting doorway, and it's part of the main floor of the house.
Okay, thank you.
That was how it was permitted. It had to have a common entrance, and it is a connected unit of our house. It moves with our house. It goes. Anybody can flow through there. It's just how it's set up.
Thank you.
Any other questions from council? Okay, not seeing any.
One more. To
Councilor
the
Corn.
director, if we approved it, and would they be able to put a second building on the property? Because I see how so much space here. If we approve prove what they're asking.
Mr. Mayor, through you, the zoning does have some restrictions with respect to lot coverage for both accessory buildings and the main building. So if they comply with the lot coverage requirements, they could either add or expand those. But if they don't meet the lot coverage requirements, then they wouldn't be able to put a second dwelling on there or a second building.
Any other questions? If not, then I will call motion put forward by Councillor Hahn. That committee received the written correspondence from Norm Mailhut, Nigel and Pamela Shelton, James Shannon, and that committee received any verbal presentations made by the public. Any other comments or questions? Not seeing any, I call the vote. All those in favor? All those against? Motion carries.
We may have already done it.
Okay, so this is where we open it up to committee input. If anyone on the committee would like to comments and questions, again, any other further questions to the director, planning department in general, now is the time to ask the questions. Although we have been keeping up with the questions all along. Okay, any further questions? Not seeing any. Then I have a motion put forward by Councillor Chofie that this special committee of the whole public meeting under the Planning Act be adjourned. All those in favor? All those against? Motion carries, and this meeting is adjourned. Thank you, Madam Clerk.